Well, folks, it is worse than we imagined. It was never reported the last many years just how bad Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny would end. But it's bad. It's real bad. It can't come back from this bad. As in Lucasfilm, James Mangold, Kathleen Kennedy, everybody involved is going to look much, much worse, if that's even possible, much worse than they did before this movie came out. We're here to tell you all about it, give you the opportunity to decide if you want to see it. Spoilers lie ahead, but perhaps in this case, these spoilers are worth knowing about. All right, folks, happy Memorial Day out there to each and every one of you. We hope you're spending it with someone that you love. We hope that you are making memories, and we hope that you are maximizing your life as we remember those who gave their entire life towards the service of freedom. So, joining us today to talk about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is Lorne Connor, Lorne of ThatParkPlace.com. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
Now, Lorne, you are an expert all things Lucasfilm. That's why you're back again. It was just a few days ago you were on the channel. Of course, people love having you on, and I love having you on. You are a fountain of knowledge. Indiana Jones is not a fountain of youth this go-around. Instead, we are going to be watching something that is very much akin, apparently, to The Last Jedi, and perhaps worse. And so, I don't typically go into spoilers ever for movies before they're released. But Lucasfilm has put us into a very difficult position. The difficult position being that Kathleen Kennedy and her crew decided that they wanted to put this movie at the Cannes Film Festival more than a month before it releases, which basically ensured that we would all know what happens in this movie, and we would be robbed of the opportunity to see it with fresh eyes. That's all part of the strategy. I can't imagine why it's a good idea, but she needed that prestige. Now, Lorne, because this thing's out for so long, and because this is now becoming widely spread of how the movie ends, and I haven't seen it. I don't know. Maybe this video will be all moot in the end. Maybe they'll reshoot it at the last second and say, "Oh God, we can't put that out." Who knows? But because it's widely known, I feel it's newsworthy, and we probably need to cover it. But just know this is not my typical foray into telling what happens in a movie. But anyway, if those of you out there don't want to watch this video because you want to not be spoiled on it, I totally understand. No worries there. But Lauren, let's get straight into this. Before we do, folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms. When you click it, we're talking about that notification bell. Here we go. As you all can see, this came out May 25th. That's how long I have been waiting on this, and I trust John Trent. John Trent of Bounding Into Comics is, in my opinion, one of the finest people you will ever meet. So he's put this out there. And we've been sitting in this for a few days, trying to find out, is this really what happens? We now believe it is. So let's get into it. Alleged Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny plot leaks claims Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character makes the heroic choice to knock out Indiana Jones to protect history. This is going to be bad. Here's what we've got. An alleged plot leak for Lucasfilm's upcoming Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny film, and by the way, essentially the entire film is now, the whole script is now leaked out there, claims that Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Helena character is the one who makes the critical, heroic decision because Indiana Jones refuses to do so. Not only does she make the heroic decision, but the decision is to punch Indiana Jones, knocking him completely out. According to Reddit user Lunk Jones, or Lune K. Jones, however you want to pronounce that, who shared what he claims is a full plot synopsis for the film at the end of the film, Mads Mikkelsen's Dr. Jürgen Voller is able to complete the Dial of Destiny and attempts to use it to travel back in time in order to kill a bad guy to prevent Germany from doing really bad things. However, the Dial of Destiny does not take Voller to Sicily in 1939, but rather transports him, Indiana Jones, and Helena, who are aboard airplanes, to the Roman siege of Syracuse. Voller and the rest of the Germans end up dying in a plane crash, while Indy and Helena are able to escape the plane using a parachute. And all of this lines up with what we've seen before. We'll get down here to the bottom. Indiana Jones basically, I'll read it and I'll explain it. He details that Indiana Jones does not want to return to his present, but would rather stay in Syracuse because he believes there is nothing for him in 1969. In contrast, Helena attempts to convince Indy to return to the present, believing if he stays in the past, he would change the course of history. In other words, It has nothing to do with Indy being a worthwhile person. He just can't change the course of history. Indy apparently, who would have thought we'd be in a Back to the Future situation here? Indy apparently is unconvinced by Helena's arguments because he wants to lay there and die. That's what's going on. So she resorts to punching him and knocking him out so that she can drag his sad sack of a body back to the present tense. Lauren, when these rumors were coming out about Fleabag and how she was going to usurp Indiana Jones, when the rumors came out that she was going to be the new Indy and that Harrison Ford was going to play sort of a Jake Skywalker type of character, this is worse than anything we've seen before. I mean, this outdoes what we saw with The Last Jedi. I mean, at least Luke got to project himself, pretend to be a fighter, and then die of force constipation. In this case, Indy is truly a broken, sad sack of a man who wishes to lay down and die in the past, and he doesn't have a character arc where he realizes he's wrong and overcomes that and becomes the hero we all know he is. The new character, the new avatar for New Age feminism, has to knock him out, to drag him back and force him to be redeemed by Marion, who's waiting there to lift his broken spirit a little bit at the end of the film, despite the fact that they're already apparently either at the edge of divorce or divorced in the film. So, Lauren, sounds like a lovely escapade into Indy, eh?
Yeah, it's hard to know where to even start here. I think maybe the best place to start is some of the original rumors that were coming out before we actually had leaks. There was a persistent rumor that was going around that obviously it was going to be a time travel related picture.
And that turns out to be partially true, yes. So
Yeah.
and I think Doomcock was one of those. We want to give him credit on that.
Yeah.
Others as well on Reddit, so kudos to them.
Yeah, and the rumor was that there was going to be a meetup with the younger Indy, and that young Indy was going to end up killed prior to 1935. And that would undo what had been done in the earlier movies. And so the rumor was that the Phoebe Waller-Bridge character was going to have to take up the hat and the whip and recreate all of the things that he had accomplished in the previous movies so that history wasn't altered. Now, I don't know how much I bought into that rumor. I wouldn't have put it past something that current Lucasfilm would want to do. I actually think this rumor maybe gives those earlier rumors a little bit more credence.
Oh, I think it verifies that they were on the right track because this is so close. You can easily see how this could have been the original and they rewrote it at the end. It lines up with what John Williams said, that they rewrote the ending, because now instead of old Indy being gone and replaced by a Fleabag, no, he's just knocked out by Fleabag and he gets a semi-happy, it's akin to getting a birthday cake at the nursing home kind of ending.
Yeah, so I think from there, what I would take is, first of all, that means this is weirdly the better version of the movie. Because imagine if they had gone through.
Oh, come on, Lord. This is awful. This is just awful.
I know.
I know. I'm with you. I agree. I'm laughing because you're right. This is the better of the two.
But it also points out just why this is such a mistake. It's like, I think what this movie, potentially, assuming that all of this is true, and the sequel trilogy have in common is the destruction of original character legacies. What you want to give your main character in this final movie is a recreation of the ride off into the sunset from The Last Crusade. You want to see that his adventures are now done. There is a legacy that has some worth at the end of it, so that the audience feels like, okay, Indy gets his happy ending. And even if it's a bittersweet ending, if it's the kind of thing where he could die in the end, but if he led a life that was worthwhile and had value, then you could feel that he died doing what he loved and what was important, and more importantly, saved the world without the world necessarily knowing it. That's the ending that you want. When you take it in this direction, the audience is left wondering, what did we sign up for here? Why does this movie exist? It is not providing a catharsis to the audience of any kind. It's just essentially doing the same thing they did with Luke and telling the audience, you need to do better, you awful colonizer and grave robber. Um, I understand trying to view history through the lens of the modern day, but
Well,
I
of the
think,
modern day in a very specific place called Hollywood.
right, but I think that that ignores and forgets the fact that in that what you would call a grave robbing period, this is how we gain knowledge of ancient cultures. It led to illumination. This is
And preserve them.
yes, and you can go back to the Egyptology craze of the late 1800s, when Europe and portions of the United States became so obsessed with Egyptian culture, that you had street hawkers in Egypt selling mummies and
Yes, yes.
grinding up their bodies as mumia as sort of this miracle elixir. Lots of history was absolutely destroyed because you could profit from it. Indy's famous line is, "It belongs in a museum," and it is because a lot of these artifacts were preserved and placed in museums that we gain knowledge of these ancient cultures. Now,
It's an effort to it's an effort to emulate the Library of Alexander. That's what we've got.
I think that
Alexandria.
there are valid arguments, I think, to be had about whether or not some of these cultural artifacts should be returned to their homelands. I think that there's potentially some arguments to be made there,
Sure.
but arguing about what happened in the past and how we came to know these things, I think, is a fool's errand.
And I think it's partly driven by our modern era where the internet is here and people have become so accustomed to the idea that all knowledge and all information can be put into a repository online that stays forever. And that's not how the world worked up until 5 minutes ago. The world worked in the way that you had to save these things in physical form in a physical place. And you can't save physical things in a physical place in a place that you don't control, especially when that place is volatile. So, it makes sense to put it in a museum. Then you can fix it later.
Well, I mean, also, something that's interesting is that if we want to talk about things like science, science is always open to debate and critique. And one of the things that's fascinating to me is you take a subreddit like, "What is this thing?" A lot of times, researchers, they can find these ancient artifacts and have no idea what this thing is actually for. I've seen
Sure.
where they'll actually put up photos and provide a description of where a particular thing was found and ask the community, "You got any ideas?" And a lot of times it's kind of interesting that the learned scientific community has to turn to people who may be involved in trades that are obscure or that not a lot is typically known about by the general public. And they can point to it and go, "Oh, yeah, I use that thing all the time." you know?
Now, Lauren,
Uh,
you said that's a subreddit called What Is It?
what is this thing? Yeah.
Okay, what is this thing? Because I have a feeling that this new Indiana Jones movie is going to be there very soon, as experts try to figure out what the heck is this terrible film. And Lauren, I want to compare this to two other films that you will be very familiar with, and the audience as well. So we know that this is running parallel, but even more strongly in the direction of the Last Jedi. But we've had a counterbalance to that. So to go back in the past, let's bring up the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade as an example. In the Last Crusade, Indy's father is a hero. Indy's father has been searching for the Holy Grail his entire life. At the end of the film, when Indiana Jones is going to die trying to get the Holy Grail, which now we know has magical powers in the movie, right? It can heal anyone, bring anybody back from the brink of death. Even with it being that powerful, and even though his father has been searching for it his entire life, his father is holding Indy's hand and tells him to let it go. And he uses his name that he prefers, Indiana. And by that fatherly love, by that heroic act, he places the value of his son above his life's work. And that redeems the father-son relationship. And the audience is moved almost to tears at the moment of its release. When the movie comes out, we all have seen it so many times now, it doesn't do that. But it's this massively emotional moment. And it resonates because they're both heroes. They didn't turn into sad sacks of men. And then I want to give you another example on the other end of this. So that's in the past. Let's go to something that just happened, or something. Well, we'll go to something that's coming on the way, actually. So as I was going to bring up Top Gun Maverick, because that's another example of your heroes don't become less heroic as they age on. But let's take another. Let's go into the future. This movie will go head to head after 12 days with Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. And again, there's Tom Cruise. He is not going to play a sad sack of a man. He's going to play a hero who, although older, remains a hero. And that's true to life. Heroes who do heroic things, who learn the beauty of sacrifice, they don't forget that as they age on. We may lose our physicality, but heroes don't lose their spirit. And Hollywood seems obsessed. And I think it's because they have no moral foundation. I don't think they have principles. And so I think they view the world in such a way that as you get older, you lose all your material possessions, you have to give it all up, you have to die, and therefore you'll just be depressed out of your mind. And that's all they've got. They have nothing beyond that. So what else are you going to do as you get old other than sit there and fart in your nursing home chair and be sad? They don't see a greater meaning behind life. But I think that doesn't work with audiences. So Lauren, what do you make of this idea that Hollywood, particularly Lucasfilm, particularly, like everybody else has learned this lesson, but Kathleen Kennedy is going full force ahead with the idea of your heroes becoming pathetic over time. I don't think it worked, and I think we're about to see that in real time. We're going to have a direct comparison very quickly.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to differentiate from you a little bit here. I think there is a way that you could tell a story starting off with Indy not necessarily being depressed and morose, but I think that you could start off with him being the time frame he's in, 1969, feeling like his time has passed and wondering, what am I doing here? I think that actually makes sense because
Yes.
I'm asking the same question as the audience. What is he doing here? Indy, as a character, all of the things that are important to him by this point in history would have passed, and he would feel very much like a fish out of water. That's one of the reasons I think that it was not necessarily a good decision to go ahead with this movie. Now, I think there's two ways you could have addressed that, and if you don't mind my diverging into
let's do it.
We have talked in the past about what I thought they should have done for an Indy movie, and
Lauren, tell people just sort of your background on. I mean, because you're not just fan fictioning out there. You've worked on some stuff regarding Indy.
Yeah, this goes back, I guess, 18 years or so. But a long time ago, there was an Indiana Jones fan game project called Indiana Jones and the Fountain of Youth that was done by Screen 7 Entertainment. And they had a project that was ongoing for a while, and I happened to stumble across their site, and they had some beautiful animations, some great stuff that they had put together for this game, Indiana Jones and the Fountain of Youth. As it happened, they were looking for a writer, and they had put up a challenge to people to submit an example of writing of a scene in this theoretical game. And they limited it to 250 words, if I remember right. And I got really excited because I was impressed by the quality of the work that they had already put out. And so I submitted the sample, and there was no way I was going to limit myself to 250 words. You can't do anything with that. But I included the scene, including a puzzle and some other things, and they brought me on board the project. I worked on it for I guess 3 or 4 years. It was kind of in fits and spurts because we all had our regular daily life things to do. The project was headed by a man named Mark Lovegrove. The artist on the project, I'm probably going to murder his name when I try and pronounce it. It was Mischa Van Latoum. I don't know if that's quite right. Had gorgeous concept art that man could put together. We ended up putting out a demo at some point. It got covered in a few computer magazines. It was very well received. But at a certain point, I became a dad, and I had to step away from the project. And so my involvement stopped there. They kept going for a while. They produced some additional demos after the fact. But the gist of this is that I'm as big an Indy fan as I am a Star Wars fan. I've got Indiana Jones props, all of the novels that were published. I've done an awful lot of research on various artifacts that could be used for these things. And so I think there's really two logical directions you could have gone with Indy. One is a plot point that had been discussed a lot back in the day before Kingdom of the Crystal Skull ever came out. And I think that that could have involved the Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life. And the natural endpoint for Indy and that kind of a thing. I think part of what sets that up as an interesting story is that the entrance to Eden is, one, supposed to be unfindable, and two, if you were to stumble across it, there are guardian angels that are guarding that entrance, and it is described as having a flaming sword that points every way to guard that entrance. So that immediately sets your writer's mind to, boy, there could be a really interesting puzzle trap here. There's lots of fun ways that you could handle this.
Absolutely,
But
and you could have it be subterranean now as well. I mean, there's all
yeah,
kinds of fun.
yeah. But the natural endpoint for Indy there is that he leaves the world and becomes a caretaker of the garden. And at that point, his natural endpoint for his life is now accepting all of the supernatural that he has seen throughout his life.
Oh,
And
Hollywood would never. Oh my gosh, Lord, they would.
sure,
they would die before they would do that.
obviously, but it's a way that you take Indy out of the world, but still give him that ultimate archaeological find that he
Right.
now becomes a guardian of.
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I just think Hollywood would vomit in their mouths at the idea of Indy validating either Judaism or Christianity.
Now, the one that I think would actually, in some ways, be more fun was an idea that I guess the opening of this movie actually touches on a little bit, and it actually touches on some real history. If you want to know where some of the lines in Raiders of the Lost Ark come from, where Hitler has become obsessed with the occult, it's because he actually was. When he was a young student, he went and he saw at the Habsburg Museum the purported lance of Longinus, which was the spear that pierced Christ's side. And according to legend attached to the artifact, it had passed through several warlords' hands throughout the years. And the power that is supposedly attributed to this artifact is that any commander that carries the spear before his army cannot be defeated. But what was interesting about that is that if the spear was dropped or lost by that commander, they were killed shortly thereafter. Now, this is actual.
But you know what? You know what, Lauren? That's poetically beautiful, because you have one of the worst men in all of history wanting an artifact, a relic, that was used to end the life or kill the icon of greatness, right, in the world. And if the idea that you would use that, then you would use the symbolism of defeating perfect good, that would be your weapon of choice to lead your armies. That's poetically beautiful.
So let me tell you where I would take this, okay? Because this is an actual real legend around a real artifact. Now, whether you ascribe those properties to it or not, and whether you believe the artifact is real or not, it did exist in the Habsburg Museum. Hitler was obsessed with it, and he did actually capture it during his conquests in Europe. And what makes that interesting is that it was aboard a train, which I believe is also part of the opening of this movie, when the Soviets captured it. And it is on that day that it was captured that he committed suicide in his bunker. And after that happened, the Soviets actually took control of East Berlin. And so they managed that portion of Germany after the war. Now, what I think makes this interesting is that if you had set it in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull timeline, say 1957, then according to the Indy timeline, at this point, the United States has in their possession the Ark of the Covenant, and the Soviets have in their possession the Lance of Longinus. So you now have two artifacts that supposedly make the army that carries it before them unstoppable, and you have the start of the Cold War happening right there. This is a stand-in for nuclear stockpiling and the Cold War. So what happens when an unstoppable force meets an unmovable object? So I think the story that becomes interesting there is you have the West against the Soviets building up their occult arsenal for a conflict, and you have Indy aware of this. You have his love interest in that case be a female Soviet defector who informs him that that artifact is in their possession. they have to team up to now recover both artifacts and lose them deliberately to take that power out of the hands of these superpowers.
And thereby, they would have also been able to do the full story arc of bringing the Ark of the Covenant back. And Lauren, that is why you should have written this movie. That is perhaps, if not 10 times better, maybe even 100 times better than what we are now being given. The Dial of Destiny.
Yeah, I think that it always works better when you are latching on to that supernatural element that is what started these indie adventures. I think part of the problem is that they advanced so far in the timeline that they started the need to go sci-fi. Now, the artifact in this is a real world artifact, but there are no supernatural powers that are ascribed to it, and in fact, they're sort of damaging knowledge about this artifact because they're changing what its composition is, and I'll just leave it at that.
Let's take a look at an article from Newsbusters.org, which is a political website. We're not using it in order to try to ascribe to their viewpoint. We are using it to try to understand the market's likely response to this film, which I think will be quite bad. Now, the reason we're doing this is I think that the enjoyment of this film is going to come down to ideological lines or political lines, philosophical lines, what have you. I think the vast majority of people are not going to like this at all. I think this is going to be a very poorly received film. At the same time, I think those who are most strongly in alignment with the idea of retconning heroes and putting stronger women in their place, those people are going to enjoy this film for ideological reasons. But let's take a look at how this is being received by the right, and then potentially by moderates as well. We already know that the critic score is atrocious, but it could be even worse for those who are quite different than critics. Let's take a look. This out of newsbusters.org by Christian Toto. Reviews confirm worst woke fears about Indy's Dial of Destiny. It says social media hasn't been kind to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, despite no one having seen the fifth film in the franchise. It's woke, users cried, citing early snippets, test screen rumors, and other minutiae. Co-star Phoebe Waller-Bridge of Fleabag fame is the new Indy, they cried, supplanting Harrison Ford's beloved hero to appease Hollywood's female empowerment mandate. Except no one had actually seen the film to confirm those rumors. And director James Mangold indirectly refuted the film's replacement theory. That changed this week. The sequel's Cannes Film Festival premiere allowed select film critics to screen the movie, slated for a June 30th release. And the early notices are less than kind. It goes on to cover those. And let's just read one of these here real quick. Well, we'll read two of them. It has the air of a film passing the torch or whip to the next generation, but it does all this in an even gloomier fashion than The Force Awakens did, which is not even to mention The Last Jedi. I'm not sure how many fans want to see Indiana Jones as a broken, helpless old man who cowers in the corner while his patronizing goddaughter takes the lead, but that's what we're given, and it's as bleak as it sounds. And then we've got this one. Waller-Bridge makes Helena quick with a wisecrack, handy with her fists, and a demon behind the wheel. And as is de rigueur in these less restrictively gender-coded times, she's unflappably resourceful, never helpless. So there you go. It seems to me that the worst of the rumors are true, and it seems to me that websites such as this that represent the right, they're going to be quite unkind. Indiana Jones was never a film franchise that appealed to either side of the political spectrum. But I think this will severely split moderates and conservatives on the one side. And then I'm not even sure that liberals will like this. Probably not classical liberals. Leftists, I'm not sure will like this. Only the people who want literally to see women supplant men perhaps will like this. It doesn't sound like, nobody wants to go back and be subjected to The Last Jedi. And so when I was considering, Lauren, whether we should even do this video, although others are doing it, I thought, do I really even want to break my principle that I try not to spoil films for people unless it's just necessary? I thought, well, at this point, it probably is necessary, because if you could go back in time and tell people what was going to happen in The Last Jedi, then would they really want to go see it? Would they really support that movie? Yeah. So Lauren, what do you think? For people who want to see Indy, what's the solution to this? Is there even a reason to go see it? I have to see it. I have to go do the review. So until I do, that has to happen. I'm not looking forward to it. I don't know if you're going to go see it, but what do you suggest to people who want to see more Indy, but this is yuck?
Well, if you want to go see more Indy, I mean, I guess you'd have to go see the film. But I don't think in the long run this is going to be seen as being Indy. I think it'll be a flash in the pan. It'll show up in the theaters, and my guess is that it will be quickly, willfully forgotten. I think if you want to get the feeling of an old indie film, then maybe what you do is you go back to some of the original sources. I mean, indie was from a long line of these type of pulp hero characters. One of the inspirations for it, for I think it was George Lucas, was a series of novels about an adventurer. I believe he was British. That was called Jim Grim. And you might look up some of those old novels. They have kind of a similar flair. There are obviously knockoffs of Indiana Jones. Being as he's sort of a knockoff himself, I don't know if it's fair to put it that way. But he's sort of the modern incarnation of this type of hero. Now you have your Lara Crofts and your Nathan Drakes. They're kind of copying that style of adventure, but they're doing it in the modern day. I don't know that anybody is doing it in the pulp period. So I think the only place that you could go to get that kind of flavor probably would be back to pulp novels, or maybe radio plays if you wanted to find something like that.
Lauren, last question for you. Were you shocked when you found out that Fleabag knocks out Indiana Jones to save the day? I mean, was that so bad that it took you aback and you couldn't believe it for a moment? Maybe staggered your mind to try to conceptualize how that could possibly ever come out of a writer's room?
No, not really. I mean, I wanted Indy 5, and again, I'm speaking out of school.
Oh, I did too.
I haven't seen the movie, so I can't comment on it until I've actually seen it. My guess is that it's not going to be good. My hopes for the how this movie would be received took an absolute nosedive as soon as I heard the title. When you have a title like The Dial of Destiny, I think that's already broadcasting what your writing quality is going to be like. So nothing really surprised me after that.
Well, I will say that I would have liked to have been somewhere in the decision-making process. And when I saw the script that said that she knocks him out at the end to save the day, I would like to have just looked at whoever handed me that and say, really? Really? We're going to put out an Indiana Jones film where you're going to knock out octogenarian Indy by a woman in order to win the day. Take this back and rip this up. Like, that's what I was said. Go write me a real script. Get out of here.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. I mean, it's just so bad. It just boggles the mind how they can do this stuff.
Well, I think more egregious than her knocking him out is the idea that he would want to stay. You know,
Oh yeah, he's so pathetic that yeah.
One of the things that I think is interesting about the Indy character, some people, there are debates about this in the online community, and I think it's kind of interesting, is that people question why he seems to be not necessarily a believer in the supernatural after he's had encounters with the Ark of the Covenant. And I think people argue about that. Some people would say that he is a believer because in The Last Crusade, when they're in the Grail Knight's tomb, and he sees a depiction of the Ark on the wall, he says, that's the Ark of the Covenant. And Elsa says, are you sure? And he says, pretty sure. You know, I think what's interesting about Indy is that he's a skeptic. You know, he's in it for the fortune and glory. He believes just enough to believe when he needs to. But after the fact, I feel like he becomes more of an agnostic. He questions what happened. He's not sure if it really happened the way that he thinks it did. And that's just my interpretation. I don't know if others would agree. But he's at least savvy enough in each of the movies to understand that, yes, you don't look at the Ark. Yes, the Sankara stones actually probably should remain in the village, because in this case, it's actually leading to their prosperity. And if he took them away, they'd just sit in the museum collecting dust. In The Last Crusade, he heeds his father's advice and recognizes that the Grail shouldn't pass beyond the seal. It should remain where it's at, and it's not going to do him or the world any good. It should just remain where it is as a legend. The idea that in this movie he would say, "No, I want to stay in ancient Rome," that's a hard sell to begin with.
Yes.
And it just, as you said, it's made his character pathetic. The question you
It
have
does
to
it again,
ask here-
Lauren. It does it again because if you look at The Last Jedi, they stole Luke's happy ending. And in this case, for all the flaws, and there are so many with the Crystal Skull, they attempted to give Indy a happy ending where he settles down, he has his family. It's poorly made. I mean, it's not a good movie. But in the end, the attempt is there to give him his happy ending. And you come to this, and it's like, oh, by the way, we took that away. I don't know how many years this is set in the future, but it's not many. And it's like, never mind. You're depressed. You're old. You suck.
Yeah, it's actually 12 years. And I think there's probably going to be an explanation for that. I think that explanation is also not going to be received very well for a portion of the audience. I expect that's going to have to do with the absence of Mutt, and I suspect
right.
there's going to be probably a little bit of commentary on the Vietnam War, is my guess. But again, you have to ask yourself, why did this movie need to be made? I think the only reason it needed to be made was that I suspect Harrison was not happy with how Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was received, and he wanted to have a last hurrah that would hopefully restore the fortunes of the series. I think that it's going to go out this way is sad.
This is the sad thing. You're right. It's not Indiana Jones who is sad. It's the people who have created this monstrosity who are sad. And they have created a very sad situation where the swan song for this character is even worse somehow than Crystal Skull. All right, Lauren, thank you so much for being here. We again hope that everybody out there is having a very meaningful Memorial Day. If you are not, if this is not a fun day for you, then we hope that there are good days ahead. And folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe. You can stick it to the algorithms when you click it. We're talking about the notification bell. This has been a conversation between two people, but that ends here. And now begins even more fun. It's your turn. Drop a comment down below. Let us know what you think. We love seeing so many comments. The engagement is insane. And we love that insanity because that means that all of you are realizing that we really do value what you think. So please, help us steer this channel. Help us steer our conversation. Give us your poignant points that we look forward to. All right, everybody out there, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
I just found out to get WDW Pro's information, where he gets his sources. I can't believe he uses. Wilton,
What?
we got a job to do. It's easy to hack into WDW Pro's computer.
You're kidding me. That's awesome. You know any other stuff?
Yeah, just Jonas Campbell told me.
Sweet.
Said Pro underpaid him or something.
A few minutes later.
There. Oh, awesome. Whatever. All I gotta do is
Whoa.
hack into this thing. It's gonna be so easy.
Yeah, this isn't
All
a
right,
hack.
grab this picture over here.
Leave it to me.
Oh, no. Oh, Wilson.
Job done. What?
No, all we had to do was use the picture because he uses face unlock. Now we gotta go to thatparplace.com and sub to him and his team on YouTube.
Oh, well, I already did that because I'm smart.